Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art Block. My name is Derek, and I will be your host once again. Now, this week we're going to talk about the Academy. The Academy, of course, is responsible for the Academy Awards, for the Oscars, and they are always announcing rule changes and new categories and things like that. So they're always changing the awards just kind of a little bit. But I wanted to talk about probably the most interesting announcement in quite a while, which is they're now requiring every Academy member to actually watch the films that they are voting on. Now, you would think that that's obvious and that would have always been a requirement, but apparently that wasn't a requirement until now. Um, Now, that's kind of always been kind of an open secret that the Academy members don't actually watch everything. Um, I remember an episode of Real Time with Bill Maher years ago when 12 Years a Slave was the big winner at the Oscars that year, won Best Picture. And there were anonymous Academy members that were saying they didn't actually watch the movie and they just awarded that because of what the film was about. And, the message behind it and wanting to, appear to be on the right side of history or social justice and racial justice. Of course, and years before that, even it had been singled out because of the racial inequity of it, of so few black films being nominated. You know, and the Oscars have always kind of put a lot of things before the actual merit of the film and the artistry, and the fact that these Academy members are just straight up not doing their job, and they haven't been. It comes at no surprise, but it really points at why we shouldn't take the Oscars too seriously, at least. The Academy voters, this past year, a lot of them admitted to not watching The Brutalist, which was one of the biggest films that year. One of the most awarded, one of the most talked about. And the film is 3.5 hours. It's a Holocaust drama. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard from many that it's kind of an excruciating watch. Like, it takes a long time to get through, and it's pretty rough. So I understand why people might not want to watch it, but that is the Academy's job. Now, I'm sure an Academy member has a lot of responsibilities that they have to, tend to, and being an Academy member entails a lot more than just voting on Oscars, but, the Academy is most known for the Oscars and for honoring film. And if you want to honor film, but you can't be bothered to watch a film that you're going to award, I think that is, there's no other word for it besides ridiculous. That is ridiculous. And there's no more DVD screeners in this era. I think as of 2020, they stopped that and they created the Academy Screening Room, which is a portal where you could go on if you're an Academy member and access a screener of the nominated films. Now, of course, there's a loophole in that where the Academy member can press play on something and they can switch tabs, they can mute it and just ignore what's playing and, do whatever, and it still counts as having watched the film. And, that will just, let them get by, and they'll never be challenged on that, and they can just vote for something that they haven't seen regardless. And another thing about this is Oscar campaigns cost an enormous amount of money. I have always been amazed at how much is spent on not making the film, not even the marketing budget to advertise the film initially to an audience, but just to campaign for an Oscar, just to put out those for your consideration ads to get Academy members to vote for your movie. It's a literal political process. It's the same thing as a political campaign, and studios spend tens of millions of dollars every year on individual films, getting those films ready for the Oscars, ready to show them to Academy members to get them to vote. Now, Anora is the film that won Best Picture this year at the Oscars. Now, I personally love Anora. I think that film is absolutely incredible. I just today watched the Criterion Collection Blu-ray. It's a late birthday present to me from my wife. The movie is just incredible, and I love it, but did its Best Picture win come from the fact that it's a great movie, or was it because of the campaign? Now, Anora is a smaller film that was made on just $6 million, but the Academy campaign was $18 million. That's 3 times the budget of the actual film. That was paid for by Neon, which is the production company, the distributor of the film. And, Neon has been raking in the awards the past few years. They've released, the last few winners of the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. There's Anora, there's Titane, Parasite, Triangle of Sadness. I'm sure I'm forgetting something in there. But they've won a whole bunch of awards lately. Yeah, they've released some really great films in the past few years too, but it becomes clear that they're really focused on the awards campaign. Now, Netflix, for example, spent $40 million in 2019 for its film Roma at the Oscars. And talking about Oscar campaigns, we can't avoid talking about Harvey Weinstein. Now, of course, these days he's known for a lot more than his film career. Let's say, he was involved in some lurid and inappropriate activities. But he was most famously at the time known for how domineering and kind of cutthroat he would be with his films. The films he produced, and especially in the awards campaigns. For My Left Foot, he had Daniel Day-Lewis speak in front of politicians in Washington, D.C. about disabilities, as his character in the film was disabled. For Gangs of New York, the Martin Scorsese film, he had a campaign where it was a fake, quote from a fake publicity quote. It was written by a publicist that worked for Miramax, but he was claiming it was from a filmmaker that never said or wrote any of those things, and and that reflected badly on the film and the studio, and that was a very unsuccessful campaign. That film walked away without any Oscars that year. Shakespeare in Love, which won Best Picture, beating out Saving Private Ryan, which many people believe Saving Private Ryan was the better film. And Weinstein put out a whole press campaign saying that, Saving Private Ryan's not quite as good as you think it is. It's just that first 15 minutes it's really good. After that, it's not such a good movie. So it kind of blitzed the whole Oscar season against Saving Private Ryan, like you would do for any kind of political campaign. You would just kind of attack the competition. Now, of course, that year, Saving Private Ryan was also up against The Thin Red Line, which is a great film, but it's a kind of an anti-war film. It's a beautiful film, but it clearly has an anti-war message, and I think Saving Private Ryan also falls more on the pro-war kind of side of things, which is clearly a political divide there, and so Shakespeare in Love obviously doesn't take any kind of political stance in terms of war, so that's another reason why it won. And also The Iron Lady, which was the biopic about Margaret Thatcher with Meryl Streep. Weinstein also partook in a controversial political or ad campaign that violated the Academy's rules right there. And so, Weinstein may not be remembered for that now. His reputation is evolving kind of as we speak. But he was kind of most famous for this at the time, before anybody knew of what he was doing to actresses and things like that. He was being, a deeply controlling force in the world of film, and doing these kind of campaigns against other films and other filmmakers, and doing whatever it took to exercise his control and his vision about his films and how they should be, and how he should be received within the industry. There are a couple examples of actors and actresses who took it upon themselves to campaign and didn't want to rely on the studios or any kind of agency. Melissa Leo, who won the Oscar for The Fighter, she self-funded her campaign. She had these photos where she's wearing fur and it just says "consider," and at the time these photos were kind of widely mocked, and didn't really understand why she was doing this, and kind of saw it as just like a joke. She self-funded these, and she ended up winning the Oscars. A successful campaign, and she really took it upon herself. She believed in herself, and she put herself out there. And in a quote, she said something about the whole process is essentially pimping yourself out to get this award, and she just did it herself rather than have another company do it for her. And the biggest example that I know of, and maybe the only example of somebody who really just refused to campaign and refused to let it be about anything other than the work, was Monique. She won the Oscar for Precious all those years ago. She refused to campaign. She said, I'm going to let the work speak for itself. And in her acceptance speech, she said, thank you to the Academy for not making this about politics and letting it just be about the merit of the performance. And after this, she was blackballed from the industry. She was told this by Lee Daniels, who's the director of Precious and many other films. And just the fact that in her speech she called attention to the fact that politics are a huge factor in those awards. It isn't just because you made the best film or you gave the best performance of that year. That really doesn't factor in all that much. And anytime a great performance wins and the best movie of the year happens to be the Oscar winner, that's wonderful. That's amazing. But that is not why it wins generally. If these films, if you watch the Oscars and your favorite movie wins the award, you're happy, but it's because of their campaign and the millions that they spent on getting that in front of those Academy members. And Monique paid the price for that because she was frankly brave enough to say it in that venue. I grew up watching reruns of The Parkers, which was Monique's sitcom, and I always liked her, and I think of course she gave a great performance in Precious, but I hadn't seen her hardly anywhere until this past year or so when she was giving an interview for the Club Shay Shay podcast. Anytime I did hear of her, it was some interview quote where she was talking about how the Oscars, in the aftermath of her winning, she was blackballed from the industry. So she is the perfect example of why the Oscars are not to be trusted, I guess, in terms of the merit when it comes to filmmaking. And she was awarded. They did their job in that scenario of giving it to the best actor, but even her thanking them for doing that called attention to what they do on a regular basis, and that spelled disaster for her career. And I think generally, in my view, the Oscars are, they're an award show, and they're, of course, awarding the best of film that year. but I think the Oscars are generally a advertisement for the industry, for Hollywood. You watch the Oscars and you're supposed to feel good about Hollywood. You're not supposed to think about all of the, you know, awful, horrible things that Hollywood does or things that happen in that world. You know, you're supposed to sit back and look and think, I love movies, I love Hollywood, I love the glamour of everything, and, for me, the Oscars do that. And I think this past year was a fantastic show. I mean, I didn't do an Oscars recap video this year, but I've just started this channel, but I didn't do an Oscars recap video. But I thought the show was phenomenal. Of course, hosted by Conan. If you watch any of these videos, you know that I love Conan. I've got the Conan mug right here. He did a fantastic job. He showed exactly why he was such a great host of his own show for so many years. He was funny, had great monologue jokes, but he had that whole exuberant silliness that I always loved about his show. In the opening kind of musical bit, he had the sandworm from Dune playing the piano, and a whole bit about you can't waste any time, but there was all sorts of ridiculousness going on, which directly reminded me of a skit on Late Night with Conan O'Brien where he said he couldn't waste any time in his show. His producer was telling him he wasted too much time, and it turned into a whole musical number where everybody's saying he can't waste time, but it was a whole bit involving like cows and a mariachi and all sorts of people, which was a wonderful bit, and I was so happy to see that kind of revived in a way for his Oscars performance, and I think it's great that he's coming back next year. That's been announced. There were such great moments. There was that great thing with Adam Sandler. All throughout the night, Conan was a great host. Of course, Anora, as I mentioned, a great film that deserved to win everything that it did. Emilia Perez, which was the big controversy at the time. And I like that movie. I think I like that movie more than anybody I know. But it did not deserve to win hardly anything. It didn't deserve to win the awards it did, honestly. In the substance, I was not a fan of that film, at least nowhere near as much as a lot of people were. But it won for, the effects and, Demi Moore. She maybe should have won, but also I think Mikey Madison kind of was the clear winner there. She did give the best performance, but I felt like so many of the awards that year went to deserving people, and I think there was a lot of moments of the Oscars actually recognizing the best, the most outstanding work, and highlighting people that you wouldn't expect to win an Oscar, like Flow. That movie was made on a free software, and it beat out other more Hollywood high budget things, and that was great to see. But I thought the overall show was great, and it did its job. It made me feel good about Hollywood, and if you know me, you know that I don't have very good feelings about Hollywood in general. As a filmmaker, I want to steer clear of that whole Hollywood machine, and I'm very critical of Hollywood as an industry, and it was just nice to kind of look at Hollywood through that glamorous lens once again. Because I used to watch the Oscars when I was a kid growing up, and as an early teenager, and I'd see that, and I'd just dream about living in LA and being a Hollywood filmmaker and things like that, before I knew all of these things about the industry and how kind of corrupt and unfair it is in many ways. And there's plenty of reasons to hate Hollywood and not to trust it, but that's what the Oscars are for, highlight the best in film and make you believe in Hollywood, make you believe in that dream if you want to be a filmmaker or an actor or anything, and also just to keep that illusion alive of Hollywood and movies being this wonderful thing that you need to cherish. And of course, movies you need to cherish always. I wouldn't be talking about this every week if I didn't feel that way, but the Hollywood system is broken and corrupt, and it has been for a very long. But you have to ask yourself, what do these award shows even mean? And if you were to win an Oscar, what would that mean for you? Obviously, actors, directors, all of these people having Academy Award winner or Academy Award nominee, that's going to help your career a lot. But beyond that, how does that make you feel? There's prestige with the Oscars, but how much can it really mean when the people awarding you for your work don't even watch it, don't even know how great you really are, and they're not awarding you for the work itself. They're awarding you for some other reason, something political, or motivated by money because you spent so much money advertising to them to gain their support. I always thought growing up, winning an Oscar would be like receiving acceptance from the industry. Finally being kind of allowed in after all those years of dreaming of being a filmmaker. Nowadays, I don't know about that. The Oscars, I think, have lost a lot of relevancy for a lot of people, myself included. That doesn't mean I won't watch the Oscars every year or at least be interested in who wins and who doesn't, but I think the Oscars don't carry that weight anymore simply because of what we've learned and how it's operated and who decides, who gets to win the awards. The Academy is comprised of tens of thousands or at least 10,000 people who vote, including some people who have no connection to the industry anymore. Somebody like Dolores Hart, who I remember seeing a news piece about, who was a nun who was once in a movie with Elvis, and she hasn't made a movie since 1963. She's still deciding who wins an Oscar. That is something to think about. And as anybody who is watching, I want to ask anybody who's watching now. I want to ask anybody who's watching now, if you won an Oscar, what would that mean to you? How would your life change? How would your view of yourself change? How would your career change? Or would that just be just a cool thing to happen to you? Would it have actually any deeper meaning? And that is all I've got to say. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a new Art Block episode every single Monday night. More movie reviews on the channel as well. Sometime in this next week, I'll have a review of The Apprentice, which is a film I've watched twice now. I think it's absolutely great, and I can't wait to give my full thoughts on that. And thank you guys so much for watching. What a time to be alive.